Hello, Superhero Ethics listeners. As I've mentioned on our blog and on Facebook, during this quarantine time, I'm trying to record as many episodes as I can, and we have a lot of great content for you. I've recorded episodes already on Birds of Prey. The morning that this goes live, I'm also recording an episode on the ethics of Q from the Star Trek universe, and we've got a number more planned for this weekend and early next week to keep content coming at you while you're stuck at home or working the essential jobs that we are so thankful for. But the other thing I've been doing recently is that, along with Matt Carroll from the Stranded Panda podcast network, he and I are doing a watch and podcast about Altered Carbon. The science fiction show that a lot of people went crazy about has now had 2 seasons out. Neither he or I is seeing it, and starting on Monday of this week, that I'm recording this and about to post it, he and I have every day watched an episode and then immediately afterwards recorded a podcast with our thoughts on that episode. And we're going to keep doing that through all 2 seasons. All of that is on the Bingers Assemble network, and I wanted today to share with you just a little bit of that. So here is the first episode of our Altered Carbon podcast that you can find on the Bingers Assemble network. Stay tuned for more great content, and thank you guys for being fans.
Welcome to Bingers Assemble, the podcast where today we're covering Altered Carbon. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I'm Matthew S. Fox.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. This was a fun episode to watch. We're trying something new, obviously, for those who've been following along with us already. We had a couple of technical problems. We're still figuring out the Twitch and the Netflix party. But even just having a couple of you making comments as we were watching along the way made it really fun. And I enjoyed getting to kind of, be the terrible people who talk during a TV show. But we got to have a good conversation, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this, because this has a lot for us to talk about.
Yeah, I wanted to be able to pause every time we had a comment to make, but because I wasn't actually on the Netflix party, it made it tricky. We had some technical issues, but here we go. Let's talk about the show, because this is the podcast after all. A lot of these people weren't even on the Netflix party. So if you haven't watched Altered Carbon yet, go watch it. We're going to talk about it now. Full spoiler alert.
I should say, especially in terms of spoiler warnings, both Matt and I have never seen the show before. So literally all we have seen is the episode we're talking about now. That's going to be part of the fun of this, is that we're going to watch the episode every day. So, as a way to establish a world, I thought it left me with a lot of questions, but like sometimes the first episode of a show, it throws so many things at me that I'm entirely confused. And by the time I get to maybe episode 5 or 6, it all clicks into place, and I think it's kind of cool. But I don't really enjoy those first couple episodes often. This, I thought, did a really good job of answering enough questions and being okay giving us some exposition and some starting information right off the bat that, like, I don't feel like I'm totally lost. I feel like I have a solid idea of what's happening in the world. I understand who some of the major characters are and who some of the major factions are. And there's a lot still to fill in, but I feel like I've got a handle on the bare bones. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, absolutely. I was worried when this show started, because the first 3 or 4 minutes was very confusing. I didn't know what was going on. I don't know what a sleeve is. I don't know what all this stuff. I didn't know what it meant. And they did something that is kind of rare these days, and I'm really glad they did it, which is just take the time to give a character a monologue of exposition. There's a trope that is always talked about in TV and movies, which is show don't tell, which I know is like the thing you're supposed to do, but I don't really buy it. Like, I think you should tell sometimes. Some of my favorite scenes in some of my favorite movies are when Doc Brown just explains what's going on in the timeline. He's got a chalkboard out and he's drawing literal lines. This is our original timeline, and it splits off here. And that's what we got with that holographic explanation of what a sleeve is. What with the device, she explained the device in their necks. Explain the entire thing, and I just thought that was really rad for them to do that. And it's honestly just my kind of nerdiness that this fits perfectly with. I would 100% agree with you there, especially because, as I see, I kind of have a modified version of it, is that I don't mind exposition when it fits in the story. As you said, let me back up a second. The exposition I don't like is when I feel like a character is saying something that I find it hard to believe that one character would say to another, and I feel like they're only saying it to tell me, the audience, what's happening.
Absolutely. And that's why you have to design stories in such a way so you have a character that needs to know that information. Like, that's an important part when you're designing.
Right.
But you get to make those decisions when you're writing a story. And often people, well, like, as you said, we'll spend 5 episodes and you're still kind of getting grasp on what's going on. And I like that this one got me in quickly. It explained the world. I mean, even if you look at like, that we during the live stream, we talked about how this kind of reminded us of Firefly, particularly the character aspects. I mean, he even said he's the only survivor of that one battle. And that reminded me of him being a survivor of Mal being a survivor of Serenity Valley.
Very much.
And all of this is so Malcolm Reynolds. He's very Malcolm Reynolds. He fought against the Empire and lost, and that's his character.
Our hero here is still, or our protagonist is literally being asked to live in the world that he fought hard to prevent.
Yes.
Which to me is very much a Mal thing.
Also, they talked about him, but going from being a mercenary to a soldier back to being a mercenary, which reminds me of Malcolm again, even though he went to being a smuggler, which is a little different. But it's still going back into like the illegal economy because that's where he fits in a world where he's lost.
Yeah. And also, just back up, one other thing I wanted to say on the exposition thing is, to me, when I talked about like an unrealistic reason, to me, having like the thing that explains to all of the new sleeved bodies what their situation is, like that makes total sense, And so to me, it didn't feel like exposition because it felt like this is what a character would say in that world.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah.
Oh, and that was so sad. The little girl in the old woman's body. That broke my heart.
That was heartbreaking. And I said this when we were live, but I want to repeat it. It's, to me, that hit home because I've said before on other casts, I love science fiction where they use the crazy setting that they're in to tell stories that reflect stories in our own world. And the idea of like the government issuing technology that literally does what it's supposed to, but in such a way that is incredibly dehumanizing. To me, I resonated with that because I know, for me as someone who has a prosthetic, happily I didn't go through this, but I knew others, especially when the war in Iraq was really bad and you had a lot of soldiers getting prosthetics. There was a number of stories of, soldiers getting a prosthetic that was a completely different skin color than they were. Something that just didn't feel like it was in any way connected to their body. So that was just one little moment that made me think like, yeah, here's a real problem that exists in our world, and 500 years or whatever it is in the future, it would probably still keep going. That was a nice little poignant moment. And I thought also just in that one little moment, it told you so much about like economic deprivation is still a big deal. The government is doing what it needs to technically, but is not really very compassionate. And, the technology helps people, but you get as much technology as you can buy. Like, all of that was told. Kind of funny, we were just saying, like, we had the great exposition. That moment with a little girl is a perfect example of showing, not telling. Because there we did learn so much about the world in just a character moment.
Oh yeah. And I don't mean that to say I don't like when they show instead of tell. I just mean that I don't mind when they tell. If it fits the story, I don't mind when they tell. So yeah, definitely this is established as a world of the haves and have-nots. What's the Blanchard? That's not the main character. That's not the rich guy. Bancroft. Is it? And Bancroft is the guy that also was, he mentions on the way there, right? He's like, I think I hate this Bancroft guy already.
Yeah, because he knows that's the guy who leased him.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, so this guy leased him. He kind of owns him at the moment. So that's obviously someone he would hate. He's also heard multiple things about him on the drive that just makes him sound like the rich technocrat that he fought against for so long.
Yeah. So one thing I picked up on, and this is kind of like one of my big questions going forward, he was obviously adjusting to some cultural things, but an awful lot of the technology, the world that we saw in his flashbacks did not look like it was 250 years in the past of the world that's happening now. And it seemed like, the trope is, like the fish out of water story. you take a person and put them in a totally different time in the future, that half the time is them trying to figure out all this new crazy technology.
Yeah.
And you'd think that, as we've seen, the speed of technology keeps getting faster and faster and faster. I'm hoping that this is intentional, like, because they sort of hinted at the idea that, like, a lot of development has kind of just stopped.
And that's kind of what I'm hearing too. Or even retracted. There's even a scene at the beginning, he says, "Where am I?" And they say, you're at the clinic or whatever. And he says, no, what planet? And they're like, Earth, obviously. So it sounds like 250 years ago when he lived, they were in some sort of expansive society that went to different planets. And now that's not such a big question anymore. Based on that one little thing. So it sounds like not only have they maybe stopped progressing, but maybe they have regressed, at least in their travels. And Bancroft, am I getting that right? Is that his name?
Yep.
Okay. Bancroft says at one point, "We've lost the time of adventurers."
That's a good point.
And so I think that has something to do with it. I think they're not going out into the galaxy anymore, it sounds like, which is... It's interesting, and is this supposed to show sort of like a post rise of capitalism, fall of capitalism after so many years, but the entrenched powers are still so entrenched that they can't be brought down? I mean, we see what automated security can do at this point. Right. You can only imagine what kind of automated security Bancroft has at his service.
Yeah.
So at that point, if you can afford that to happen, then who can stop you? I mean, he even has the greatest security that he has is the fact that every 48 hours he's downloaded onto a satellite that apparently can't be taken down, which I feel like that's going to be the season ender, right?
Guaranteed something happens to that satellite by the end of the show.
Take down that satellite so you can take down Bancroft for real.
And it's interesting. I have not been much of a video game person, but I just started playing The Witcher, in part inspired by the Witcher television show, which I know we're probably going to talk about as well at some point. And I'm having to once again get used to that idea of, if you think you're about to go do something dangerous, you save the game, because it's likely that you'll do 20 minutes or 2 hours of great progress and forget to save the game. And then if you die, you have to go back to the last save, Yeah. And that's exactly, there's a lot of things about this that make me feel a lot like a video game, like the way characters can respawn, but, they don't remember the last couple hours. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. I don't know if it's intentional, a comic book, a video game reference, but it definitely came through for me. Yeah,
I definitely think it's an allusion to that, if not an intentional. I mean, it's just a way that this world can work. And what's kind of cool is I could totally see a Altered Carbon video game where every time you respawn, you're in a different body.
Oh, that would be so good.
It'd be kind of fun.
One thing that actually, one of our people who was watching along with us, I think this was No One's Minion, but if I got that wrong, listeners, please write in and let us know. But, we were seeing that Tech, the protagonist, was originally in an Asian-presenting body, and now is in a white one. And his name certainly sounds very Asian. So my impression is that he was an Asian person, and is now in a white body. But that the point that our listener brought up was, what does race mean in a world where your mind is constantly moving back and forth between different sleeves, and that the different sleeves can have different cultural appearances and different racial appearances.
That also relates to how often is this happening? His scenario is very novel, it sounds like, but how common is resleeving in this world? It sounds like victims get resleeved, prisoners get resleeved from the stock of sleeves they have, which sounds like when someone goes to prison, they take. There's tons of ethical issues, and I'm jumping over to other things, so we should stay on the race thing for a second. It just really matters. I hope the Star Trek fan in me and the human being in me hopes that at this level, where we're at least 400 years in the future or whatever, the race won't matter. At least in some form. I mean, sure, you want to hold on to your culture and care about your culture, but it won't be a thing where people are discriminated against.
Yeah,
people aren't being judged by their race.
And certainly that I don't know if that's where we're going, but certainly I'm hoping and I'm expecting, because I feel like if you had a TV show that, if nothing else, started with an Asian character but then being downloaded into a white character with no conversation about the racial implications there in the show, I think I know enough activisty people who would have had some things to say about that. So I'm fairly confident this show is going to tackle race and, or at least the racial implications of this kind of sleeving and de-sleeving.
Yeah, possibly.
So probably can't figure out too much, but I'm definitely looking forward to where it goes with that.
Yeah, man. Me too.
You brought up, though, another great issue, I think, which is, it's another one of my big questions, which is, like you said, how many people are getting sleeved? Like, are most of the human bodies walking around sleeves? Is this something that's reserved only for the very rich or for victims or for someone else? Like,
she says at one point, it sounds like so human bodies still have to be born and they still have to exist. It sounds like these aren't fake human bodies. So they only have a store of sleeves based on ones they've gotten rid of. And it sounds like a lot of the ones they're sleeving are prisoners. Those are the stock of sleeves they're using are prisoners, which is a whole different ball of wax, an ethical issue of like, well, and it really comes down to the real ethical issue on this show, which is, what is a human being? Is it just their memories, which it seems like what at least the society believes, but not all of the society, because they talk about the archdiocese and how they say that if you are spun up anything after your death, then you go to hell. So there's an archdiocese, a religious, I guess the Catholics believe that this entire process is inappropriate and not okay. But most of the society seems to accept it as a way of, like this little girl getting a new body or whatever.
Right.
Or prisoners. And the fact that prisoners, if you were just your memories and the only part of you that matters is this little disc in your neck, that seems very dehumanizing, but it also gives you a lot of power and flexibility. It's interesting.
And this is a question that, like, AI writers have been talking about for a while, or just science fiction writers, like, what would it mean to have your consciousness, separate from your body and being able to put into other bodies? I do think it's a topic the show is going to get into, especially because we did see that, it seems like that this war that happened 250 years ago was in large part to stop some of what was happening. But also that, which I'm not quite sure how that works, because it did seem like that they were already even in stacks at the time that all that happened.
Well, it seems to me that at least so the lady seemed very amazed by this guy being 360 years old, Bancroft. Right. She was like, she talked about Methuselah. So it sounds to me like he's one of the oldest people, is what she thinks at least. So I have to imagine it's been about 360 years since they've been doing this process. And now that being said, he could have been 120 when he got his first one or whatever. So it's very possible that 250 years ish when I can't remember the name of the main character, Takashi.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'll look up where you speak.
It's very possible that Takeshi is from the first generation. We also saw him as a child, so I'm assuming that body was his first body. He had a sister, so I'm assuming this is his second body. And it seems like maybe at 1 year old he was given this device. I forget the name of the device, but he's given this device, and then his generation had a fight against it. But at the same time, it's very possible that while he was fighting against them, and Bancroft says he remembers the envoys, the ones that are fighting against this the way. And I don't think he's necessarily fighting against this technology, but it sounds like they're fighting against a world where only the rich. We're not sure though. It's up in the air.
Yeah, that could well be. Two other, first of all, the character's name is, and I may well be pronouncing this wrong, and please write in if I am, Takeshi Kovacs.
Takeshi Kovacs, okay. Kovacs is what they kept calling him, that's right.
Yeah, Kovacs, I think, is probably the easiest thing we can choose, which is interesting as well, because the first name definitely is Japanese sounding, the last name is not. Unless I may well be misunderstanding that, but that's certainly my initial impression. One of the things I wanted to pick up on what you said was, first of all, I do think there is still some concern about this in the modern day world because of the protest we saw outside of the prison as he was getting out. And the
archdiocese. I think those people are allied with the archdiocese that believes that this shouldn't be happening.
And again, I don't know how much the religious world has changed from today to now. But if you told me today that an archdiocese was particularly opposed to something, one of my first thoughts was, okay, you're saying the archdiocese, not the Vatican. So does that mean that not all Catholics agree and that some archdioceses have a different perspective? That might be me reading too much of our modern world into this world, but it's certainly something I'm going to be curious to see as they explore. Like, I think the show is set in San Francisco because it seemed like that's certainly there's a shot that looked kind of like the Bay, and they talk about Alcatraz. But I'll be curious to know, like, are different parts of first of all, maybe like, is this part of the world one where they, are they doing stacks and sleeves in Africa or China or Europe or wherever? But also, is this an area where there's more controversy about it compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I have no idea. And to be honest, I just knew that archdiocese was a Catholic term. I don't even know. I didn't even know there was a difference. I'm not very versed on on Catholicism or its parts.
Son of a Southern Baptist minister, I can imagine it's not the highest thing on the education list,
especially in Alabama. I'm son of a Southern Baptist minister in Alabama, so there's not much Catholicism around here. Some of my best friends are Catholics, actually, and I've been to some services with them, but I don't know anything about the inner workings or. Obviously, I know what the Vatican is, and I know what the Pope is, but archdiocese is just a term that I've heard in movies, basically.
Yeah. I just, because I've worked for a long time in politics and partnership with religion a lot, I know a lot about the sort of political workings of the Catholic Church and its hierarchy. But the other thing I was thinking about in terms of the idea of the 350 years is I'm wondering so we have it seems like there's two different ways that a person could have been alive all this time. One of which is Kovacs, where you're literally like, you were alive 250 years ago, you're locked up in cyber storage, and then 250 years later, you're brought back. My impression is that is something that is weird and crazy and strange, but at least makes sense to people. Whereas Bancroft has actually been walking around and existing for 350 years, which means that his stack has been safe for 350 years. And so I'm kind of wondering, is that part of the thing of that there's just kind of the general belief of like, over 350 years, it's likely something's going to happen, and that you are eventually going to have actual death. I don't know. That's all conjecture, but to me, it's one more interesting thing to look at in terms of how they view age.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the difference between, and it seems to me that a lot of the stack stuff going on is just to serve the rich. Like it seems like that yes, it serves victims, and that's probably something that was that the victims in these cases had to like kind of fight for, and still aren't getting what they need out of it. But they've clearly stated if you have enough money, you can get whatever you want. You can get re-sleeved however often you want. Which, by the way, the actor who's playing Bancroft, I love that actor. He was on a show called The Following with Kevin Bacon.
Okay, I was wondering where I knew him from.
Yeah, he's really great. He was really great on that show, and I'm really liking all the actors in this show.
I think I'm going to make a point to not look up any actors because. Since there's a high probability, I imagine it's entirely possible that we'll have a couple of characters who change actors halfway through the show because they get re-sleeved.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to be careful not to look that up. But yeah, that is definitely an interesting thing.
I just love this world they set up, and I love how many options there are going forward and how few they used in this first episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we kind of got a basic idea of what sleeving is, and that's not the thrust of the story. This is not a story about sleeving. It's a story about him deciding whether he wants to work for the man or not. It's basically Malcolm Reynolds, and they're asking him to work for the Alliance, and he's having to decide whether it's worth it to him. And the thing that convinces him in the end is he thinks he can somehow complete the mission, which the mission, as far as we understand it, was to stop this society from happening. Like, he keeps saying, "This is not my world." And so,
Right.
I like that they've built this incredibly complex sci-fi mechanic with a lot of room to try different things that, like, maybe we won't expect. Hopefully they'll do things we're not even thinking about, but also it's not about that. It's still a very human story about a guy getting out of prison and a guy who fought on the wrong side of, or well, not the wrong side, the losing side of a war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I like that because, I mean, as I see it, we really have three layers of a story. We have the sort of overarching, like, let's let you explore this whole world, and you're going to have questions, and we're going to eventually dive into the answers to those questions. I don't think anyone from the making of Lost is involved with the show, so I'm pretty hopeful there. The second level, and I think kind of the primary story, you're right, is going to be the human journey of this person and probably the other people in his life. I mentioned while we were live casting that I think it's almost definite that at first I thought it was going to be the girl who dies with him in that in the flashback, but now I think it's the black woman with braids who I think we're pretty sure is Falconer. You know, I'm almost certain she's going to come back in some kind of a sleeve. But the point being, like, what we have the story of, you know, Kovacs's journey and him trying to come to terms with this new world or come to terms with fighting against the world. And then we also have a mystery, which I do get the impression that we're going to have that may not span the whole season, but the exploration of the mystery and thus the exploration of Bancroft's world is also going to be a fun story. So I think this is a really good example of a first episode that gives you enough about the world to sink your teeth into and you don't feel totally lost, but also has set up these three different kind of lines of questions that you have a lot of questions on, and I'm at least really excited to know more about.
Me too, man. Me too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other things we haven't discussed about this episode that we want to, like, dive into? We haven't really talked about the cops, the police officers.
Right.
I liked their characters. I am interested to see. We talked about it on the live stream, but yeah, it looks like those two are going to get together at some point. There's a lot of, or maybe not, or maybe she will. Out of they tend to like characters like her to stay chaste because it keeps them professional. And so it's very possible that'll take a while. I don't know.
I mean, I predicted they'd get together because unfortunately that's just the trope, and I'd kind of like to see something break the trope, but we'll see. About the cops, I was actually thinking beginning, like, they're some of the people I most wonder, are they sleeves as well? You know, and that's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, like they're not the poor, they're not the victims, they're just kind of middle class cop people. So, like, it's interesting that even I need to know more about the society. Like, I need to know statistics, like, because it doesn't seem like there'd be enough bodies to go around if these stacks continue to exist, unless they're putting stacks in, like, newborns or something, which might be something they explore at some point, which sounds really awful. Because
on the one hand, also, if the bodies are all coming from prisoners or people who died young or things like that, then your first thought is that for the most part, the sleeves are probably not going to be in the best condition. But they did mention at one point that, you know, an envoy would get downloaded into a body that had, you know, advanced combat mechanics and stuff like that. So it certainly sounds like they can alter bodies in some way.
Well, yeah, and it made me really interested in that first scene. They're talking about, like, him having the ability to see through walls. There's, like, superpower stuff happening. And, like, was that something that was going on 250 years ago but isn't really going on now? I can't imagine that. Surely there's going to be something with that. I don't know how did he upgrade? Because we see him as a child. And you know, this may not be the case, but I assumed them because of the change of race and the change of age and, like, the lack of care of which sleeve you get. I was assuming that the young Asian boy is the same sleeve. I find myself being really weirded out because I'm watching this show and I'm just starting to think of all the bodies as sleeves instead of people. And it's like messing with me a little bit. Like, I am having moral issues because I'm like thinking of this little boy who's probably just a little boy who hasn't been sleeved, and I'm like, that sleeve, is that the same sleeve as the same as the tattooed Takashi in the future? Or
and I am having a similar kind of thing because my partner and I have been diving really into Westworld. We spent a lot of our first time in quarantine just binging Westworld. Which, have you seen that?
Oh yeah, I'm caught up. Yeah. Well, I haven't watched last night's yet, but I'm caught up other than that.
I mean, that has all kinds of similar issues about like what is the nature of a body and the nature of consciousness. And in that one, it's all about bodies that are literally manufactured. But I'm having trouble not seeing those issues from this show through the lens of Westworld. So I think it's going to be really interesting to me to see this as a different take on kind of similar issues and where this goes with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And depending on your own proclivities, it could have very different feelings because at least most of the AIs or the bodies or the people or the whatever, the hosts in Westworld, I guess spoilers for Westworld, not too many, not really spoilers, are actually AIs who are being built. And I guess all are AIs that are being built. Now, these are actual people that their brains are being stored. So does that give us different feelings about who they are and what they are? And to me it does. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, which is all about what Westworld is about. But like, I do have a different feeling about these people who were born as humans and have been downloaded. They have like an immediate, value to me that some of this, especially the sentient AIs on Westworld don't.
Right. I feel like there's a very good possibility that that's the direction we'll go in. I also feel like at this point, I just don't know enough to know because, like you said, I kind of want to go back and rewatch that really great speech by the woman at the kind of like, "Hello, welcome to being a new sleeve," because I feel like there's some details of that she gives about who exactly are sleeves and who is not that I'm forgetting right now. I will say though, also, I am really glad we're doing this and going back and watching a show that, has been out in the public consciousness for a while. But I'm also remembering why I like to watch shows right as they come out, because what I really want to do is just, Google search, like Google search, what does being a sleeve mean in Altered Carbon? Right. But of course, if we do that, we're going to get horribly spoiled. So there's no way we can.
Well, also, it's a problem with the Netflix model where they come out with 13 episodes at a time or whatever. I think this is 10. I think this is 10 and then 8. So there's only 18 episodes of the show currently. And it's just like, you can't, it's hard to talk to anyone about it because everyone's on a different episode. And that's why we're doing it this way every day. We're all in quarantine. I don't know how many of you guys are out there in quarantine, but we're going to do one a day and we're going to do this whole thing. And we'll be doing the Netflix party, which tomorrow, I don't know what we're going to talk about or what we're going to do tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to keep the Twitch thing going while we're doing the Netflix party, because obviously anyone checking in on Twitch was probably just like, what's going on here? It's just quiet. But we had planned on chatting on Twitch, but we ended up chatting more on Netflix party. So we might just do Netflix party, then go live at noon.
I think we have some more thoughts to do about that. Though certainly for any of our listeners, if you have thoughts on that, please write in and tell us. If you were on either Twitch or Netflix or both, tell us what that was like for you, and that can help us decide what to do next. I think it's a good time also to start moving towards listener discussion. But I wanted to just ask you one last thing, or at least just make one last point about the police. I love that we have a story that has multiple factions.
For sure,
I don't like when, you start out with a whole bunch of different races or different groups doing different things, and then you start to realize like that actually a couple of them are all on one side and a couple of them are all on the other. And I'll use as two examples, like the recent TV show The Watchmen, to me, is a great example of you've got like 4 or 5 groups or people all have their own agendas. Some are kind of working with each other, but they don't know each other's motives.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's not just one-on-one.
There's a few people that stay pretty teamed up, but like everyone has their own motives, which is how life is. And I think it's much more interesting, and it allows for shifting in alliances that you can not expect, but that make sense. You know what I mean? And there's some shows that just like shows that simplify it down to where like there's just good guys and bad guys, which is kind of what most of these sort of genre shows end up doing. It's hard to believe when someone changes from the dark to the light. It seems like a much more intense change, whereas something like this, where you just you don't even have to change. The situation changes, and then you are suddenly on the opposite side of the gun or whatever.
Right. Well, and not even just that, but also just when we get the reveal. I'm trying to say this without spoiling anyone. But there's a TV show, Matt, that I know you've been watching recently, where at the start of the TV show, we had a couple of different groups that all seemed to be working against our protagonist, but for different reasons. And more recently, at least I haven't seen the most recent episode, but more recently we learned that at least two of the big ones are working together. And that to me was definitely a disappointment. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'll text you about it later. But hopefully some people know what I'm talking about.
Maybe we'll do it off the recording if it's a spoiler. Or you can say spoilers for or whatever, and we jump forward 30 seconds. Or whatever. Sure. But I don't know. I don't know what that is, but yeah, I get your meaning.
I think that was too general and probably a mistake. But yeah, I'll let you know. We can post it somewhere so people have some idea what in the world I'm talking about.
I don't really mind when people end up being on the same team. I do kind of mind when I just don't like the dichotomy of good and bad. I think that's really what it is. And we mentioned this on the live stream again, but you were talking about how this show is much more adult. And much more, I forget the word you used, just very explicit.
Sexually explicit.
And you said that's something Netflix doesn't do. I don't think that's really a Netflix thing. I think you might be just thinking of like The Defenders, which honestly, even some of those shows got pretty sexually explicit, at times, but I think that's like a artifact of they're also Marvel. You know what I mean? Like, so, but Netflix has some shows that are pretty explicit, and, this being one of them. I'm thinking of like Black Mirror is pretty dark in times and gets really weird and explicit in some really strange ways.
It may be I'm not seeing all the Netflix stuff. I've generally had a sense of like obviously like the Marvel Netflix universe doesn't do nudity because it's Marvel and it's supposed to be kind of like PG-13. And I have some thoughts about like the mostly no nudity, but really graphic violence.
Oh, yeah.
But that's another question. But to me, I feel like, and I know that there's a lot of Netflix stuff that's much more explicit than that, but I've always sort of felt like there was a kind of line that, there's the HBO level of like just gratuitous sexuality that I don't even say, like, it's not even that it's a bad thing. Like, I can enjoy watching that, to be sure. But that some of the HBO shows have not just nudity and not just like a sex scene, but very sexually explicit moments.
For sure.
That I haven't seen much on Netflix. And this was the first time, like, there was one moment where, and it's in the kind of holograms, but like where a woman is like very clearly giving a blowjob to someone, and you don't like see a penis.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like it's walking that line where very clearly she's giving a blowjob, but they very deliberately cover the penis at all times. So it's still not getting obviously into porn, but it was really close. It walked on the line. I will say I just think this show is intended for adults, and most of the stuff we've done on Stranded Panda, and most of the stuff we cover here is. Most genre stuff is meant to be sort of PG-13 or PG to be for all ages. And this show is not. So, if you come from any of our other shows and you're used to us talking about superhero shows that are a little more PG-13 or PG, sorry, this is not that. This is a rated R show.
Just imagine this is all of us talking about Deadpool, because this is definitely on a Deadpool level compared to the rest of the comic book stuff we watch.
Yeah, this is rated R. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I got to say about this for now. I think we've covered a lot of the sort of just, this is good world building, really good world building. Yeah.
Just kind of looking at some of the text we got, when we were in the Netflix party, there were some interesting discussions. Certainly a lot of people had different opinions on, who were we going to see come re-sleeved back and things like that. One comment that I just want to read, because we kind of talked a little bit about it, was No One's Minion says that he liked that this was just kind of a bit of world building and establishing characters, which I think is very true. And I think that's, we didn't really sink into the stories very much, but we we did so much to establish the world that I feel like it's a great place to go forward from.
Well, and speaking on not sinking into the story, what the story circle is, or like the sort of Joseph Campbell story structure.
Yeah.
This is all resisting the call. This episode is all resisting the call. And at the end of the episode, he finally accepts the call to adventure. And so this is just literally world building. It's like who he is. And now he's been resisting the call all this time. And now he's just decided to like let himself enter into the adventure. Right.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. And I think we're going to, we're going to work out some of the kinks technologically and figure things out. But I think we're going to be really strong going forward.
Yeah. So we'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. to do a Netflix party with our patrons. If you are interested in being a patron, we have three different shows on Stranded Panda Network that you can patronize: the Superhero Ethics podcast, the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, or the DC On Screen podcast. All of those are part of the same network, and if you're a patron of any of those, you can get on the Netflix party. If we don't get maxed out, we may let others join the Netflix party. But as of now, we're trying to keep it to patrons. And if you go become a patron, we'll let you know every day on the Patreon where you can get the show. And we've also got a patron-only group on Facebook. It's just Stranded Panda Patrons. You can search for it and a request entry. And if you're a patron, we'll let you in. Easy as that.
And I think all the links will be there, but also just for folks who don't know me before, I'm the host of the Superhero Ethics podcast. And so anyone who's looking for more information about that or to find the Patreon for that, if you go to the superheroethics.com website, that'll take you right there. Be careful Googling, because it turns out that someone wrote a book called Superhero Ethics. Someone after I established the name, but it's a different realm. The funny thing is he's doing it from a very different, fairly conservative point of view. So don't get us mixed up. But if you actually go superheroethics.com, you'll get there.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, again, we are Stranded Panda and the Bingers Assemble podcast. This will be up as a podcast. So if you only caught part of it, you can catch the podcast a little later. I think I might actually stay on the live stream a bit. Since we've been live streaming a while, I might just do a little music.
That sounds good.
Yeah, man. I think it'll be cool. So we're going to switch over and just do a little music for a little while. If you guys have any requests, I'll play some songs. And this ends the podcast. Thank you for joining on Bingers Assemble. Peace.
Have a good day.
Bingers Assemble is a part of the Stranded Panda Network. To connect with us, search your favorite social media platform for Bingers Assemble, or go to strandedpanda.com/bingers. While there, you can find more from your host today and the rest of the Stranded Panda Network.
Wow, how things can change from one week to the next. Hey, hope everybody out there is staying healthy. I know everything is super crazy. We feel disoriented by the COVID-19 virus. It's more important than ever to stay connected and check in with your loved ones. That's why I'm so happy I've got T-Mobile. Listen, T-Mobile isn't just talking the talk. They're taking measures right now to make life easier for everyone by doing the right thing for their customers during this really critical time. For example, T-Mobile has ensured all current customers with data plans have access to unlimited smartphone data on their network for 2 months. We're all in this together. T-Mobile truly believes that. And while many T-Mobile stores are temporarily closed to help keep customers and employees healthy, they've still got you covered with any help you need. Just check out T-Mobile.com. You can see what stores are still open and how you can manage your account online. Stay safe out there. During congestion, customers using more than 50 gigs a month may notice reduced speeds prioritization, video typically at 480p, capable device required. Wow, how things can change from one week to the next. Hey, hope everybody out there is staying healthy. I know everything is super crazy. We feel disoriented by the COVID-19 virus. It's more important than ever to stay connected and check in with your loved ones. That's why I'm so happy I've got T-Mobile. Listen, T-Mobile isn't just talking the talk. They're taking measures right now to make life easier for everyone by doing the right thing for their customers during this really critical time. For example, T-Mobile has ensured all current customers with data plans have access to unlimited smartphone data on their network for 2 months. We're all in this together. T-Mobile truly believes that. And while many T-Mobile stores are temporarily closed to help keep customers and employees healthy, they've still got you covered with any help you need. Just check out T-Mobile.com. You can see what stores are still open and how you can manage your account online. Stay safe out there. During congestion, customers using more than 50 gigs a month may notice reduced speeds prioritization, video typically at 480p, capable device required.
Don't kid with COVID. mHealth Fairview wants you to know the COVID-19 virus is here now. The world has shown us it can spread quickly with serious consequences. Maybe you've heard the term flatten the curve. Unchecked, the virus could spread quickly and overwhelm our community. This is happening in Italy today. But South Korea has proven that smart prevention can limit COVID-19's impact. Wash your hands, avoid big groups, stay home, don't go out. We've all got to do our part. For more info, visit mhealthfairview.org or the Minnesota Department of Health.
Wow, how things can change from one week to the next. Hey, hope everybody out there is staying healthy. I know everything is super crazy. We feel disoriented by the COVID-19 virus. It's more important than ever to stay connected and check in with your loved ones. That's why I'm so happy I've got T-Mobile. Listen, T-Mobile isn't just talking the talk. They're taking measures right now to make life easier for everyone by doing the right thing for their customers during this really critical time. For example, T-Mobile has ensured all current customers with data plans have access to unlimited smartphone data on their network for 2 months. We're all in this together. T-Mobile truly believes that. And while many T-Mobile stores are temporarily closed to help keep customers and employees healthy, they've still got you covered with any help you need. Just check out T-Mobile.com. You can see what stores are still open and how you can manage your account online. Stay safe out there. During congestion, customers using more than 50 gigs a month may notice reduced speeds prioritization, video typically at 480p, capable device required.